Okay, it's time then to rate the budget of Nirmala Sitharaman, to decode it also, of course, for you, the viewers. I have a panel of expert voices who are going to do that today for us. In the studios, Rajdeep Dubey, my colleague, managing editor at Business Today. Also with us is Shashi Tharoor of the Congress, Amitabh Khan, CEO of Niti Aayog, Rahul Bajaj, leading industrialist, Narendra Tomar, Agriculture Minister, Naina Lal Kidwai, banker, Jai Panda of the Bharatiya Janata Party. So all bases covered, and we're going to go one by one through the various aspects of the budget to try and get to the top of what this budget meant. And I want to start with you, Jai Panda, and ask you, what is the big idea of budget 2019? What do you see is the big idea behind this budget? Because many are asking this question from the morning. Is Nirmala Sitharaman engaging in a budget that was plugging far too many gaps and looking for welfareism rather than the big idea?
Not at all. In fact, in response to the allegation that this budget plays safe, I would say that this budget is the exact opposite of playing safe. It is breathtaking in its ambition. The commitment to 100 lakh crores in infrastructure investment over the next 5 years is something that India has never seen, has never had the guts to contemplate in all the budgets before this. So that is absolutely breathtaking. And some may try to say that this is not backed up with either numbers or with any other quibbling about it. I would like to say the following. The numbers about how the budget adds up is in the annexures. The vision statement which is presented in the budget doesn't necessarily have all the numbers, but it's in the annexures. And what is even more important is that this comes on top of a 5-year track record of having demonstrated the capability of transforming infrastructure. I would like to point out that of the 1,32,000 kilometers of highways in India, fully 20% was built only in the last 4 years. If you look at rural roads, the Pradhan Mantri Gram Sadak Yojana, it has been raised to an incredible speed of 135 kilometers every day. So when the government has demonstrated its capability to shift gears on infrastructure, then to shift it to such a high level is transformational, because there are always temptations. You could do pump priming to very quickly get the growth rate up and give a feel-good atmosphere which would then collapse in the medium term. That's not what the government has done. The government has taken the important steps, not the immediate urgent steps which would just feel good. Right. Look at what it has done in terms of tackling the NPA problem. For the first time in a dozen years, you saw last year NPAs going down by 1 lakh crores, and the bankruptcy code which was brought in has led to a recovery of 4 lakh crores. These are serious steps. So it is a breathtaking budget which shifts the focus onto infrastructure. There are many other ideas, but this is the biggest idea that you were asking me to spell out.
Okay, we'll come to that, because that's contentious, whether that's, whether the budget really has built this as a big idea or simply a continuum of what was done in the first 5 years at a time when private investment needs to be kicked off. Now, Shashi Tharoor, you heard Jai Panda. The opposition seems to believe that this is a budget which is lacking, in a sense, boldness. That, why do you say that? Why is the opposition's criticism seeming that this budget is not bold enough? What would you have liked to see, given that this is a difficult time for the economy?
Right. I mean, it's a sort of Trishanku budget. It's neither here nor there. I mean, the fact is that what we got was neither a bold vision nor an emphatic statement of realism, but rather high-level, long-term aspirations and no practical means of getting there. So you talk about a 5 trillion economy, but what's the roadmap in which you're going to get to 5 trillion? And more important, how is it going to affect the actual Aam Aadmi? Because it's the money that's disposable in the hands of the ordinary Indian that really determines how much economic well-being he or she experiences. Now look at what's happening to the Aam Aadmi. You've got already the highest rates of petrol and diesel in the world. Now you're going to be paying 2 rupees more, a rupee of cess and a rupee of excise tax on top of each litre. Now that 2 rupees more, I believe the finance minister in a press conference said it's only for those who own their own means of personal transport who will be affected. That's not true, because in fact if the Aam Aadmi wants to go buy a shirt or a chappal, even if he goes on foot, that shirt or chappal has reached the bazaar from the factory on a vehicle using petrol or diesel. And if the cost of that transport goes up, so will his price at the market. And so the average person is going to end up really suffering from the consequences of this unnecessary extra tax.
I'm going to focus on this issue of whether this budget is bold enough or not. Amitabh Kant, CEO Niti Aayog, how do you react that Nirmala Sitharaman has been risk averse? She has played safe. She could have used this opportunity perhaps of a massive mandate that the Modi government had to really kickstart private investment, which, as the economic survey pointed out only yesterday, is the biggest challenge. Is this budget simply not bold enough?
So let me point out the risks which the government has taken in this budget. Firstly, there were several headwinds which we were facing in the economy. There was an issue of liquidity, so the government has provided 70,000 crores to the banks and capitalized them. Number two, the issue of NBFC and HFC has been brought center stage. There has been a regulatory oversight has now been provided. The government has brought in this bit about being a stop back for up to 10% for a period of 6 months, up to 1 lakh of crores, which I think is a good step forward. Secondly, I think the big risk taking has been in the fact that the government has committed itself to private sector strategic disinvestment, and it has committed itself to asset monetization, because greenfield investments may take time, so brownfield investments are going to be put out into the field, and that would really mean that mobile towers, grids, pipelines, etc., you will go through models like InvITs and REITs, etc. So this is a lot of risk taking. And the third bit is about putting in close to about 100 lakh crores into infrastructure for the next 5 years. So all this will lead to private sector coming into areas of roads, airports, ports, etc. over a period of time. And this will really bring in the animal spirits of the private sector. The challenge before the economy was, how do you ensure liquidity, how do you bring in credit flow, how do you bring in private sector? And to my mind, this is what the budget will drive at.
Will this budget kick the animal spirits of the of entrepreneurship? Nainalal Kidwai, do you believe it will really trigger the animal spirits of the economy, as Amitabh Kant is pointing out, or Jai Panda suggesting that this focus on infrastructure will in itself create this virtual cycle, or is it a missed opportunity, as many others as the critics are suggesting?
So it could, but I can't say convincingly it will, because what we have is the stimulus that comes from infrastructure, which is great, and it is a very ambitious and good infrastructure play. The issue really is in terms of what we were hoping was consumption-led demand, and that would require money being put in the hands of people. So farmer type reform, which could have driven the rural economy, income in the hands of the middle class, where some effort has been made, but maybe not enough. For example, electric vehicles and loans therein are given a set off, but you have to be someone who wants to own a vehicle and not sort of join the Ola, Uber user of cars to really benefit from that. And at the end of the day, tax rates actually moving up, albeit for the higher income groups, are all taking away from consumption-led growth. And for exports, where it is again critical that we have competitive industry, corporate tax rates at 25% will be helpful for a larger slew of companies up to the 400 crore revenue mark. But we do have many companies which are in the export space, which are north of the 400 crore revenue. So maybe it's something that will happen over time, but we do need to make sure that Indian industry is competitive in every way, corporate tax rate, but also efficient labor laws, availability of land, and more and most critically capital, where interest rates need to come down and capital as in equity and debt needs to be available. So it's a mixed bag. Animal spirits, hopefully, but we will have to wait and see. I think the disinvestment agenda is very aggressive and good, and I do believe achievable given the big statement government has made on looking at the 51% cap that they used to work to earlier,
right,
and looking at it in a way which combines holdings by other government-owned entities, and that's a big positive.
Okay, I'm going to come to that because, many are wondering whether the government actually has the will to push ahead with strategic disinvestment in the manner that they claim in the budget. But, Shashi Tharoor, quick view from your point, what would you have done differently? Do you think this was the time to take those big structural reforms? The government instead has chosen incrementalism, which is neither here or there. What is it that you would have done? What is it that Nirmala Sitharaman has not done that, let's say, if there was a Congress finance minister, you would have done?
That's what this government has done. What our government used to do was indeed, there was always a bold vision. And I remember the BJP spokesperson, who was Arun Jaitley, regularly saying that it wasn't bold enough. Well, now he had 5 years without much boldness, and now we have a finance minister who's very much gone down the incremental path. I mean, I congratulate her for her stamina, standing there for 2¼ hours without even a sip of water and reading a large speech was great. But what's the vision embodied in that speech? One can speak of Vishwas and Akanksha and so on, but these are very long-term aspirations. I think what people are concerned about is the here and now. The BJP came with a certain conception of what they were going to do. They announced a number of targets. If you just look at the last 5 years' budgets, Rajdeep, they haven't fulfilled any of them. Even disinvestment. What have they done in 5 years? I mean, all their disinvestment targets, first couple of years, were not met at all. Then they met them by getting one public sector company to buy shares in another public sector company. That's not disinvestment in any serious sense of the term. So we need to know what their vision is.
What is the vision? What is the vision, Amitabh Khan? What is the big headline point? What is it that you believe is the big idea? The question I asked earlier to Jai Panda as well. What's the big headline point? Is this budget lacking that vision statement, as some are calling it? What's the vision? At a time when the economy is slowing down.
I think the big idea for me is really pushing for liquidity, pushing for private sector investment, reviving the animal spirits of the private sector into the economy.
The animal spirits are being spoken about, again and again, that we are going to revive the animal spirit. Do you see that happening at all, Rajiv Dubey? You're smiling as you're hearing these voices. Are you skeptical? As someone who observes what happens in the economy, is the crisis much deeper than what the government is making us believe?
I'm skeptical because the government, first of all, the animal spirits that the government hopes to revive is via FDI. And FDI is nothing guaranteed in that. You're talking of FDI coming into aviation, coming into media, coming into all the other sectors, insurance. And the biggest FDI proposal that they have is that mega infrastructure, in manufacturing facilities, in things like fabrication, chip fabrication, lithium ion plants. These are things that we have tried for a long time, and nothing has really come into the country.
That's exactly it. Amitabh Khan, why is it that when we speak to the private sector after the budget, they don't seem to be enthused? This budget they seem distinctly unenthused. There seems to be no excitement over this budget.
So, Rajdeep, for a budget to, it takes a little bit of a time. I mean, quite often markets don't respond, private sector doesn't respond immediately. But as you will see in the days to come, this will be a budget which will really push. And the real task before the government is to really push for implementation of what it has committed to in this budget. And you will see a lot of that happening with this huge political mandate which the government has got. I think it will really push for strategic disinvestment and asset monetization.
I'm hearing from all of you the strategic disinvestment, like the budget clearly says, Air India and other CPSEs, we were committed to 51% disinvestment. But Jai Panda, where are the buyers? And even if there are buyers, the fact is Air India has been hanging fire for years now. The fact is that the government of the day has again been very cautious in the past. Are we going to see a different Modi 2.0? This budget doesn't give us an indication that we're going to see a very different government to what we saw in the first 5 years. Welfareism remains the priority, handouts remains the priority.
No, in fact, that's exactly wrong. So let me point this out. There are basically two pushbacks against this budget. One is, as Naina Lal Kidwai was saying, that some people would want it to be consumption-led, which would require priming the pump. Now, that has become the conventional way of boosting economies over the last few decades. Now, it can have a short-term benefit. It doesn't necessarily have a long-term benefit. The long-term benefit is, if you look at China over the last 40 years, it has gone from being a third world developing country just like India into an economy which is almost 5 times bigger than India's, and that has primarily been by massive investment in infrastructure. And this is exactly what India should have been doing for a long time. It has been picking up over the years, and now this is a shifting of gears to massive investment in infrastructure. Now, if 100 lakh crores investment in infrastructure doesn't impress some people.
No, where's the money coming from?
God knows what will impress them.
Where is the money coming from? Where is the money coming from? Jai Panda, where is the now 100 lakh crores? Where's the money coming from at a time when the budget clearly shows a sharp revenue deficit?
So let me complete. Let me complete. Now, the government has also shown very conservative and serious handling of the fiscal deficit over the past 5 years, and this is a fact. It's not just my opinion. The reality is, as the finance minister pointed out today, while there has been a global slowdown, India still remains the fastest growing large economy, and despite the pessimism that I hear from inside the country, including some of my co-panelists, the rest of the world sees India as one of the major shining spots in the global economy, and that is indicated by the 64 billion FDI that we got last year during a period, as the FM pointed out, that FDI has seen a reduction in the rest of the world. So I don't think we should be so pessimistic that we can raise the resources, and the benefits of GST you're seeing consistently over a period of the last several months is beginning to pick up, and it will keep kicking in on a much bigger level. But I want to complete. The other pushback against this budget is what my friend Shashi Tharoor was saying, which was about what the common citizen benefits from it, and he was talking about petroleum prices. While petroleum prices go up and down, and I wish you would have equal debates when the prices go down, the reality is inflation is another thing that this government has excelled in managing, which is why in the recent elections, for the first time in living memory, inflation was not a factor, and nobody, not even the opposition, not even Shashi's party, took it up because it did not get any traction with people. So I think people have recognized that you can build the economy by, it's not rocket science to invest massively in infrastructure and have a medium to long-term view of developing India rather than just a short-termist view of priming the pump.
I've got Yogendra Yadav joining me in the studio. I'll come to agriculture in a moment, but this budget was supposed to be about industry. Because, if you look at the economic survey, that was to be the focus. I'll get you to respond in a moment, but let Tharoor respond to what he's just heard from Jai Panda. Mr. Tharoor, there are those who will say Modi-nomics at the end of the day is about welfareism. The Prime Minister has spoken about right through this budget targeting various social groups, SC, STs, artisan farmers, and in a sense this is an Indian way of doing a budget. It's not a westernized way, and it's worked electorally. Many would say it has worked politically. The Prime Minister can turn around and say people at the end of the day have voted for his government. So when you've got a situation like that where the government can claim this welfareism is working, why ask for these big ticket, big idea reforms when it's working?
Well, in that case, it's the Congress way, because welfareism was our mantra, not theirs. For 4 years, they poo-pooed our welfareism. It was only in the 5th year in Piyush Goyal's interim budget that they discovered the importance of welfare. But be that as it may, let me take one concrete example, Rajdeep. The Pradhan Mantri and the Finance Minister both boast of what they've done for farmers through the Fiscal Bima Yojana. You know what happened in practice? insurance companies collected almost 50,000 crores in premiums and they've paid out only 31,000 crores. Now, this is an improvement. On the contrary, in fact, claims made for the Kharif crop, which finished in December of 2018, still haven't been paid today in May. 40% of those claims haven't been paid by the insurance companies. So when we say this is a Soot-Boot Sarkar, what we mean is that they have got a solution ostensibly in the name of the common man, the farmer welfare, which is actually benefiting the fat cats and the insurance companies and not the common man.
But it's worked politically, as I said. The Prime Minister can turn around and say people trust him. He's just won a big mandate. There's low inflation, macroeconomic stability, big ticket welfare schemes. That's what's Modinomics. And if it ain't broke, why try and fix it?
Well, first of all, as far as inflation is concerned, let's see how the 2 rupee cess plays with the public and with the costs of their daily items. But as far as the welfare schemes are concerned that seem to, as you say, be working, the truth is they have been given the benefit of the doubt by the public. That is, toilets have been constructed. Now, it so also happens, according to objective independent studies, that 65% of those toilets don't have running water. Now, the people have said, at least kuch na kuch to kiya, they built a toilet, the water will come. So the government still has to deliver that water before these toilets are usable or are cleanable or are maintainable. Otherwise, the practice of ending open defecation will only be a theoretical claim. Similarly with the gas cylinders, yes, you're right, it won them votes. A lot of my friends in the media who went up and down northern India said many voters praised these 2 things in particular. Well, as we also know from independent studies, 90% of the recipients of the gas cylinders cannot afford to refill them. So you're getting either no refill or sort of 1 refill a year instead of the 6 that you should be doing, or 12 ideally, which means that most of the time you're still cooking on a chula with wood or dung and breathing toxic fumes because you can't afford the gas that's supposed to make your life better. The government only boasts about the fact that the connections are there, but they don't do anything to ensure that the people's purchasing power enables them to take advantage of those connections.
Mr. Tharoor, at the end of the day, as I said, the government's won a majority, so I presume something's working. You know, let's turn to the farmer issue. For example, this budget, many believe, hasn't spoken enough about the farmer, unlike what happened in the interim budget when there was an election to be won. To that extent, has the government said, look, we have welfare schemes in place. We have the Pradhan Mantri Kisan Samman Yojana in place. We have given monies. We are making small incremental efforts. Don't expect big ticket reforms in every budget for the Kisan or indeed other. This is targeted political populism, Narendra Modi style. That's what Modinomics is about.
Rajdeep, in fact, as you would know, before the budget, I said we do not want any big declaration for the farmers. We simply want this government to fulfill what it has said in the last 5 years and to be real to whatever it has said. And I think it's not merely about the farmers. Let's look at the big picture. I've been sharing about animal spirits, and I was feeling slightly out of place because I care more for human spirits, but forget the pun part of it. I think this was a real big opportunity. It was a big opportunity because here is a government which is more politically secure than any government. First woman finance minister, a strong person. Here was an opportunity to break free from many of the stifling traditions that have come in here. But I find this opportunity missed. I find it missed because simply lack of transparency. You don't photocopy a budget of February, present it in July with a 2-hour speech, and you actually even conceal the fact that there are no budgetary allocations which are different from February. That's not done. That you don't do. You don't break from the tradition with this. B, simple failure to face the simple facts. Here is economic survey telling you there is a slowdown. Here is the unemployment survey telling you unemployment is the highest in the last 4 decades. Here is the farmer situation which is getting worse. The finance minister in this year could afford to acknowledge it. This was a year she could have done that.
Because this is, you seem to be suggesting the government is living in denial. That the government is trying to in some way gloss over the real situation, is window dressing the situation, hyping the state of the economy, which many believe is in a crisis. Now, they've touched the banking sector. And they've attempted, because that is one of the critical sectors of the economy. Let me turn to Amitabh Kant, because Mr. Kant, in a way, you know, what we are hearing at the moment from a Yogendra Yadav and others is what I've been hearing, you know, from a number of times. Because, you know, for example, strategic disinvestment. This is not the first time the government has spoken about disinvestment. The results have been mixed. The question then is, will the Modi government this time walk the talk, given the fact that you've got a serious economic slowdown staring us in the face?
But Rajdeep, I've also seen a lot of roads being put out for asset monetization and being taken over by international investors, and I've recently seen airports being put out for private investment. So I've seen a lot of political commitment on this, and the finance minister has today stressed on the fact and reiterated the commitment of the government to strategic disinvestment. And we must understand that when you do strategic disinvestment of government businesses and government public sector undertakings, they need to be done in a very transparent, competitive manner because you are opening yourself to a lot of criticism, and therefore it has taken a little while. But the cabinet itself has approved about 35 public sector companies for private sector disinvestment towards private sector. So you will see a lot of actions in the coming months.
You know, we'll see a lot of action is what you're saying, but you know, Jai Panda, taking off from what Yogendra Yadav said, you know, the belief that the government is being economical with the truth. They're not leveling with the people. This has been you know, there have been, of course, the controversies over fudging of data. Leave that aside for a moment. But just the state of the economy, jobs, not one word was mentioned on the jobs and the crisis of, you know, creating jobs through growth. Not one word again mentioned on just the scale of agrarian distress in terms of falling agriculture incomes. I just want to understand, should the government come and tell the country, look, we are going to go through tough times, rather than saying, look, we are going to be a 5 trillion economy. Yes, we all want to be that. But why not accept that the next 2 quarters could see pain?
So two things here. First of all, the alleged controversy over data has been comprehensively answered and demolished. Anybody that has questions, I urge them to the responses given by Surjit Bhalla and
we can debate that on another
Professor
day.
Panagaria. Now, secondly, I have an issue with one question that's being asked.
Yes.
Yes, separately. So secondly, one question I have an issue with is being asked that where is the big idea? In fact, the people who are asking that are only wanting to go back to the small ideas which have been tried before. The big idea is the elephant in the room that I keep repeating. Only China has done it over the last 40 years. 100 lakh crores investment in infrastructure is breathtakingly big. And it's nothing like the world has ever seen other than China in the last 40 years. So that is the big idea. Now, coming back to the next 2 quarters, yes, indeed, the global economy has slowed down over the past more than a year, and the Indian economy has slowed down also, but still remains the fastest growing large economy. You asked about farmers and you asked about jobs. These are relevant questions. Now, please note that the economic survey yesterday shows that rural incomes have been rising since middle of last year. So that's a good sign. And what the government has talked about in terms of streamlining the hurdles that still exist in the APMC rules and to use ENAM, I think are significant. When they are implemented, you will see further improvement in the farming sector. And in jobs, besides what Amitabh Kant pointed out with this massive investment in infrastructure especially, will create a lot of jobs, but also the commitment now to pare down more than 200 labor laws into a set of 4 codes. Now I can tell you, you can ask anybody from the private sector, anybody who creates jobs, they bend over backwards not to create jobs so that they don't have to deal with those 200 labor laws. These are significant commitments that the government is making in this budget to help create jobs.
You want to quickly respond to that? You know, am I seeing 2 very, very starkly different views? One, that, you know, the government is living in denial. The other is that, look, the big idea is there. The government's commitment to infrastructure, for example.
Breathtakingly vacuous is what I would say about 100 lakh crores. Because a figure like this should be backed by something. You would say, out of this 100 lakh, I'll get 20 from here, 40 from here, 30 from here, over this period of time. I mean, how can you just throw figures like this? As the younger generation says, kuch bhi.
And let's not
is that true?
Let's not forget, Rajdeep, that this 100 lakh crore also includes, also has an addendum, which is 25 lakh crore in the Sankalp Patra itself into agri infrastructure. So it's all of 1,25,000 crore. Now, in an economy when the country is earning as a nation 20 lakh crore in a year, how are we going to spend 125 lakh crore over 5 years is the roadmap that is not there anywhere.
So you don't see a
Rajdeep,
roadmap for this $5 trillion?
Can I also add this thing of data? It's not limited only to what Arvind Subramanian said. Although your former chief economic advisor saying so in public is a very serious issue. There is a problem of GDP old series. There is a problem of your labor survey. And why is it that economists, I mean, I don't go by foreign magazines and I don't hold them as certificate, but economists this morning says that India is out-competing China in fudging data. Don't you think foreign investors look at these things? Are they fools? Do they go by our budget speech? Don't they actually know what's happening to our economy?
You know, one of the, of course, the big number, the Prime Minister keeps repeating it, Nirmala Sitharaman repeated it, is $5 trillion. Shashi Tharoor, do you believe that this $5 trillion economy number which is being spoken about, you know, that the government says, look, trust us, we are going to actually, that's the roadmap that we are going on. Do you see, Shashi Tharoor, that happening? That, you know, when we speak of a $5 trillion economy, the government is speaking of that. Do you see that happening? The 5 trillion economy question which I keep asking and I've been asking, do you believe that this is a dream, a jumla? Are you telling me it's only a jumla?
I'm afraid it's going to look very much like that because we're nowhere near. We're not even 2.5 trillion yet. So for us to aim at 5 is a lot. But the bigger question is, what does 5 trillion mean to the Aam Aadmi? Our population goes up. What we need to see is the per capita GDP in rupees in the pocket of the average person in this country, because that's ultimately going to be his experience of what life is all about and whether he has an economic well-being. 5 trillion is all very well. It's the only macroeconomic figure given, and it also corresponds to a fantasy, not to today's reality. Let me stress, what the government ought to think about is the person who's paying for that extra 2 rupees cess on petrol. The government ought to think about that farmer who is paying premium to the insurance companies. By the way, 85 lakh farmers have left the Pradhan Mantri Fasal Bima Yojana because they figured out it's a racket. Unlike the Congress UPA scheme, which paid out 3 times in liabilities what it collected in insurance, the government scheme has only paid out 70% of what they've collected. The government scheme has paid to the insurance companies. And finally, if you really look at the question of welfare, we need welfare that works, not welfare that you can just boast about. You've constructed toilets, you haven't given them water, or you've brought in gas cylinders, people can't refill them. That's not a successful tenure yet. I agree they've got the benefit of the doubt from the electorate. I respect the judgment of the electorate, but I do say to you, Rajdeep, that this government still has a lot to prove. And in any case, their 5 years have been marked by an astonishing gap between rhetoric and reality. And that gap must be overcome if this country is, forget 5 trillion, this country is simply going to give a decent life to the majority of its citizens.
You want to respond, Jai Panda, one last time to that rhetoric versus reality? I come back to it, and I'll come to my other panelists also on that rhetoric versus reality. There's a lot of vision statement. It sounds very nice, lot of good intent. But the content, the gap between intent and content, to quote Siddaramaiah, the former Karnataka Chief Minister, or rhetoric and reality, to quote Shashi Tharoor now.
I think this issue of rhetoric versus reality has been comprehensively answered in the recent elections. But you know, I don't blame Shashi for trying to double down on the same arguments which did not click, which did not work. And the tragedy is that you could hit some people with a big idea on the head with a hammer and they still wouldn't recognize it. And I'm not talking about Shashi here, I think he does recognize it. But there are political compulsions for wanting to go back to a culture of handouts. And yes, there are people in India that need a safety net, and the Modi government is ensuring that nobody will be left out of that. Nobody will be left in the lurch. But the reality is there has been a significant shift of gears into the attitude of how to reach $5 trillion. And let me answer Shashi's question as to what that means. I think we know what the population of India is likely to be in 2024. And as we reach $5 trillion economy, the resources available per GDP per person, or the resources available to the government to ensure a better life for most Indians, is going to be significantly better.
Nainalal Kidwai, do you also buy this $5 trillion economy? Dream, we moved from New India to $5 trillion economy. I just wonder whether, do you really believe it's possible?
Well, I'd like to believe that is India's true potential. Getting there may not be easy, but it wasn't very long ago where we were doing an 8% and hoping for 10% GDP growth, and no one was questioning the numbers then. So why can't we get to that and really harvest the potential of this country? But I just want to come back to some of the comments made, and I can certainly comment in the area of sanitation, given my perch as chairman of the India Sanitation Coalition. And the schemes that the government put forward there are not to be knocked. And Shashi is right, you do need water, but you don't need that much water when you go for the gold standard, as it's described in rural India, of the twin pit toilet, because that does not require a flushing mechanism, just a cleaning and maintaining mechanism. So some of the technologies that have been adopted in taking forward this are really quite small in terms of their technology input, but have worked. And I do believe that the government's program in sanitation has been a huge success. What we now need to focus on is treatment, and that gets mentioned in terms of looking at ways to take forward solid waste management, and the budget talks about it, mentions it. Of course, we have to look at how the private sector can engage therein. And the other I would really like to mention is, if the government is now as serious as it has declared on water and provision of water, and take that agenda forward with the same urgency and energy that they did sanitation, I think what we see is the life of the common man and woman in India go up enormously. And we have heard World Bank numbers where 50,000 rupees per household gets saved from proper sanitation and water provision.
Can I just take that therefore, I'm hearing these various voices. Let me take that now. Abhishek Manu Singhvi replaces Shashi Tharoor as the opposition voice for a moment from the Congress. Abhishek Manu Singhvi, the question is, this is the Modi model, welfareism. This is what he talks about. Water is now going to be the new thrust area. The government is committing itself, though there are question marks over how much of money is it actually putting into Jal Shakti. I'm just going to ask you this, Abhishek Manu Singhvi. Has the opposition got Modi-nomics wrong? You see Modi-nomics in terms of where is the structural reform like in 1991. Modi-nomics says, look, we are incremental, step by step, focusing on basic necessities, wins us elections, wins us the hearts of the poor. We are a pro-poor government, is how they want to position themselves.
Rajdeep, first of all, let me remind you, I'm not part of a panel discussion. Secondly, if winning elections justifies and makes correct everything you do, then there'll be nothing left to discuss in a budget, because you have won elections. As a matter of fact, what is mysterious and astonishing about this budget is that with the kind of mandate you have, this was the year to make, if not big ticket, if not other structural reform, at least medium ticket structural reform. This was the year to make some painful fundamental changes. I see absolutely nothing. In fact, it's an astonishing budget, almost as if I have to go through the motions of presenting a budget and I should do it. Secondly, Rajdeep, you please tell me, pinpoint a single major big ticket kickstart to employment. Have you given any great incentive to MSMEs which are languishing? Have you done something striking for agricultural distress? We have to separate off-budget and on-budget issues. It's all very well to say 5 trillion economy, NRIs will get an Aadhaar card entry, PAN and Aadhaar can be used for income tax returns, we will do 8% growth. These are not really budget, these are announcements, feel-good announcements. What is the concrete thing in the budget to lead you? You had 3 issues, Rajdeep. Private investment. Please pinpoint what is this great thing in this budget which will induce private investment.
No, 1 minute. Let me take that to Rahul Bajaj. He's been listening patiently.
Please tell me how labor will be generated.
Let me take that. let me take that. You're saying you don't see a trigger for private investment.
You know, our policy in the party allows us not to go to panel discussions. I'd love to be there, but you know, that's the way it is, and that's the way we've agreed.
Okay,
let
me ask you. Let me therefore ask you one question before one more
panel discussions. But as you know.
Okay. You know, I accept your viewpoint, and I appreciate your having joined us. We'll leave it there because we've got other voices also therefore today. I want to come to Rahul Bajaj. He's waited patiently, Dr. Singhvi, for 30 minutes. You know, you're hearing these various political voices. How do you rate the budget as one of the eminence gris of Indian corporate India? Is this a budget of missed opportunities, or has Nirmala Sitharaman simply played safe at the moment?
I wouldn't say it's a play safe budget because they don't need to play safe. Could have been bolder, but you see, with the resource constraints, it's easy for me to say that. But there could be missed opportunities. Yes, I think there are some missed opportunities, but the major single problem is the resource constraints, and I have to give full marks to them for 1918, the fiscal deficit being 3.3%. There are enough arguments to spend more money for various things and to encourage growth and employment that they could have had a higher fiscal deficit of 3.4 or 5, but much more than that. Would that create bad ratings? And
I'm having some problem with your audio. We'll try and go back to Rahul Bajaj in a moment. Yogendra Yadav, you know, this whole thing of farm incomes doubling. You know, one of the various $3 trillion economy doubling of farm incomes is mentioned. Listening to what Narendra Tomar, I spoke to him short while ago, the agriculture minister, and I wanted to quickly respond to him. Listening to what Narendra Tomar had to say when I asked him, is this budget actually going to really take us to doubling of agricultural income by 2022, or is that also a jumla? Listen in.
राजदीप जी, मैं इस संबंध में आपको एक ही आग्रह करना चाहता हूं कि प्राइम मिनिस्टर मोदी जी ने जो वायदा किया है वो 2022 तक पूरा होगा। इस मामले में मैं आपको आश्वस्त करना चाहता हूं। जहां तक बजट का सवाल है तो हर चीज बजट में लिखी नहीं जा सकती।
Okay.
और
Tomar ji, so you heard him there. He says you've got to trust Mr. Modi. You see, it's about trust. Mr. Modi was trusted by the voters, Yogendra Yadav. This is where Mr. Modi has successfully been able to separate politics from economics.
Rajdeep, I want to trust my Prime Minister. And I welcome this declaration, doubling of farmers' income in 6 years. 3 years have passed. Am I not entitled to a midterm report? Should the Finance Minister not say, she produced all kinds of statistics for all kinds of things. Should she not have said, 3 years have passed, we wanted to increase income by 100%, we've been able to manage 30, 40, 50, whatever the real figure was. Why do we not have the figure? Why is the government not even trying to get a figure? There is this committee for doubling of farmers' income, which has produced a lovely report. Why is it that the government doesn't give an action taken report on this? Why is it that in a country which is facing a drought, we do not have one single sentence from the finance minister on the drought and what is the government possibly trying to do about it?
So not a single sentence on drought, not a single sentence on jobs. But I want to come to that question that I've been asking right through, and that's the central question, the big idea. And I'm joined by someone who I think is one of the finer economic minds in the country, Dr. Ratin Roy, Director of the National Institute of Public Finance and Policy, a member of the Prime Minister's Economic Advisory Council with us. Ratin, you know, I've been trying to grapple with a number of people today. What is the big idea? Did you see a big idea in the budget, and therefore is this a missed opportunity, or did Nirmala Sitharaman play safe?
There should never, ever be a big idea in one budget. The big idea should be, as it is, one of development transformation. The big idea in a country where we have to maintain fiscal prudence is to do the things that don't cost money to achieve what you want to achieve. And there I am reasonably satisfied when you look at the financial sector, banking, etc., that many of the reforms that I've been hoping for that don't cost money have been initiated. And the process of bank capitalization, the finance minister says, is now coming to a close, and therefore there is now not the concern that we have stressed there. We have seen action on NBFCs. So on that front, I'm quite satisfied, but I'm a public economist. I want first and foremost fiscal prudence, which means that when the government sets a fiscal deficit target, it sticks to it, and this budget has done so. I would have even been happy with a slightly higher fiscal deficit if that could be maintained, but the finance minister's commitment to a 3.3% fiscal deficit next year and an assertion that this year we will keep to 3.4% is very welcome. The big idea that we have had to play with and that is often broken in the breach is maintain fiscal discipline. This budget does it. And that's my bottom line.
I understand that, Dr. Roy, but this is also a question. This is also a budget coming at a moment of an economic slowdown, as the economic survey admitted yesterday, of a need to kickstart private investment, of a need to return to some kind of a feel-good factor. Do you see the budget having done sufficiently in that direction, or are we heading for more pain? Is this budget, without saying so, actually telling people that, look, it's going to take time. There are no magic solutions to getting the economy back on track?
I think you're absolutely right on the latter front, and that is a good thing to do. Anyone who believes that the budget is some kind of a health spa for the economy, where you go in and get some feel good happening by getting a facial, doesn't understand the reality of how an economy runs. An economy is fundamentally economy like ours is fundamentally powered up by the private sector. What the budget can do is remove, and other policies, is remove obstacles from the private sector delivering growth. What the budget can do is actually try and make sure that agriculture growth revives and that farmers' incomes go up. So if one has to judge the budget in that respect, one has to realize that this comes along with other complementary policies, and in that sense this budget has enough there for the private sector to take seriously and kickstart growth. But it's not a feel-good budget, and that's a very good thing, and it is a budget that is signaling that the hard work of getting the economic growth rate up is a multi-stakeholder job. Government can do its job by making life easy for the private sector, but ultimately they have to pick up the baton and run with it, and I would expect to see the private sector put their money where their mouth is when they've got so many of the reforms that they've asked for, if those reforms are executed successfully, and that remains to be seen. Because many of these things that are promised in the future tense tend to founder in the present continuous tense. Finally, I'd like to say that the government has yet again unveiled a plan for significant increased disinvestment, and that should pump some money into the economy, and if any feel good happens there, it will happen if the private sector is bold enough to pick up that baton and run with it.
Thanks very much, Ratin. I know that you were you made the time for us, but I also want to turn to Amitabh Kant, because you've been waiting. When we speak Amitabh Kant, and you've heard various views of structural reforms, land, labor, capital. The finance minister today spoke about labor reforms, capital reforms in terms of recapitalizing banks, of addressing the NBFC crisis. How will you respond to those who, right through the critics who've said this is all very incremental? Do you really think there will be a dramatic turnaround? Will the banking crisis, for example, evaporate tomorrow? Suddenly the liquidity available for companies who want to invest?
Rajdeep, I think the key to economic growth on a long-term basis is about saving, investment and exports. But exports can't happen without manufacturing in India. And to my mind, the big thrust in this budget is about, one, pushing for private sector investments, and the second big ticket and key thing is, quite often in India we get into sunset areas of industry, but this is the first budget which has talked about new areas of growth and giving them tax exemption under 35AD. That is accelerated depreciation, areas like gigafactories, PVs, large-scale computer manufacturing, etc. So this is the first time I've seen this vision of large-scale manufacturing in India and getting foreign direct investment into play for this. It also talks about opening up several areas of foreign direct investment as well. And the third thing is, it talks about raising resources from abroad at lower rates using, so to my mind, if it might use a proxy like Exim Bank for raising resources from abroad, but then it will greatly benefit because you will get foreign resources at very low rates of interest.
Okay, we've heard lots of voices. I want to give you Rajiv, who's listened to them. You're a journalist. What's the big headline? What's the big headline in the pink papers tomorrow? Is it, as I say, play safe budget? Nirmala Sitharaman bats with a straight bat, refuses to play T20 style cricket. since we are in World Cup season?
To my mind, it's a give and take budget. But what I can foresee is that if
what do you mean by a give and take budget?
It has given some and it has taken more out of the individuals, out of corporates, out of everybody. So you know you have given some tax reliefs, you've taken more tax
So what you
reliefs.
gave in February in the interim budget, you're now slowly taking back.
You have taken them back. So, but my big concern with this is that the government seems to be relying only on public expenditure to revive consumption. So there's nothing in private sector, which basically means that you're going to be delaying the economic revival. And that if you are losing 2 to 3 quarters in the turnaround in economic revival, you can very well kiss goodbye to 7% economic growth in this fiscal at least.
Okay, those are strong words. Let's leave it there. Clearly, this budget has divided opinion. It has, as most budgets do, perhaps only in a way created a sense of unease and not really resolved the larger question of which direction is the economy going. But maybe Modinomics is something which is work in progress, and we'll have to wait and see whether the welfareism that Mr. Modi promises can work at a time when there is an economic slowdown. Either way, Nirmala Sitharaman has created history today. Our image of the day is dedicated to Nirmala Sitharaman. She presented her maiden budget as India's first full-time woman finance minister. As always on a big day, we end with a song. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.
Thanks for watching the video. For more such news and updates, please like, share and subscribe to India Today. Also check out our other great videos from our channel. We know you would love to.